Welcome into The Rundown, a daily podcast where we at CBN News bring you inside information about the stories we're working on. Today is Monday, April 19th, and I'm Caitlin Burke. Having a baby is life-changing. Unfortunately, very few parents get paid leave to help that transition to family life, and that can lead to all kinds of negative consequences. Senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon says we could soon see a big shift in this area, as lawmakers on both sides of the aisle agree that some federal paid leave plan is needed. She joins me now. Jennifer, for the average family, what does time off surrounding the birth or adoption of a child look like in terms of pay?
Well, this is pretty shocking, Caitlin, and this is something that really surprised me as I really started to look into this story. Most women return to work within 10 days of having a baby. And so any woman who has ever had a baby can think about that's really quick after, giving birth or having a C-section. And on top of that, only about 19% of workers have access to any type of paid family leave. And when you look at lower wage workers, that number drops to 9%. So you think about only 9% of low wage women who work have access to any type of paid leave from their work, which is why I would imagine they're going back to work within about 10 days after giving birth. And, Caitlin, we're both moms, and we know that whether you have, whether you deliver your child vaginally or have a C-section, you are still, as a woman, as a mom, recovering physically from giving birth. And on top of that, you're breastfeeding around the clock or feeding your child formula around the clock. You're not sleeping. Your hormones are racing. You're really in no position to be returning to work that quickly. And especially if you think about lower wage workers, these are the types of jobs where you're typically on your feet, and, being more physical than just like sitting behind a computer. And so that is this kind of state of affairs in America when it comes to women giving birth to babies.
I had my daughter 9 months ago, and going back to work after 10 days would have felt impossible, both because I don't think I had moved from the couch at that point, and because I hadn't had a chance to bond with her as much, get to know her. I mean, I was still just totally in the dark. It seems like there are so many negative consequences of a mom having to do that. What have you found in terms of those consequences of the current policies?
Absolutely, Caitlin. I mean, this leads to health problems for moms. I mean, if you are, I had personally have had 2 C-sections, and I know that if you move the wrong way, if you try to lift something that's too heavy too soon, then you are going to disrupt your womb that's trying to heal. And so it can lead to health problems. It can lead to depression. And again, women often, even when they have all the support they need, even when they have paid leave, in the best circumstances, many women suffer from postpartum depression. And so you add on top of that the pressure of needing to provide for your family and needing to get back to work, on top of having no sleep, and on top of, overriding the desire of your heart, which is to be with your child. I mean, that just adds so much stress, which can add to the depression that women are already prone to during that time. And as you said, Caitlin, it can prevent them from bonding with their babies. And let's face it, even though this precious little bundle lived inside of you for about 10 months and is a part of you, and you almost feel like you know him or her when their baby's born, you still have to bond. It's a human being with a personality, and you have to get to know them. You have to understand what cry means that they're hungry, what cry means that they're tired, what cry means that they hurt themselves. And it's a process that is very important in those first few tender weeks and months after having a baby. And so many moms, and we haven't even talked about dads, but they don't get to experience that because of this pressure.
So what about leave for dads?
Well, this is really fascinating because as we talked about moms going back to work quickly, dads tend to go back even sooner. And this can be problematic not only for the dads, but also for the babies. And this is really fascinating to me, Caitlin. Studies show that fathers, when they're home in these first few weeks after their children are born, they produce the same love hormone, oxytocin, that moms produce. And so they have a physical reaction by being with their baby in those first few weeks so that they too can bond. And other studies show that when dads are more involved, their kids have higher cognitive scores. Are you seeing God's design kind of taking place right now? And so it's good for everyone, for moms and dads to be home with their babies in those first few weeks.
What incentive do lawmakers have to pass some sort of federal paid leave plan?
Well, this is a great question, Caitlin. And there are a number of things that I think are important incentives. First of all, one study shows that paid leave can actually save lives, like literally save lives. And that is because 10 weeks of paid leave is associated with a 10% drop in infant mortality. Think about that. 10% fewer babies lose their lives because their parents have access to paid leave and can be with them. That's amazing. On top of that, when you think about government support of families, financial support, about 40% of moms are less likely to go on public assistance and less likely to need food stamps. 40%, that's significant when you're looking at the federal budget. And so those are some really strong incentives. And, supporters of paid family leave, a federal program for paid family leave, say that this lack thereof really creates this impossible situation because we know that for about 44% of Americans, they can't cover an unexpected $400 emergency. They don't have access. So if something happens that's going to cost them about $400, that is a financial catastrophe for them. And so if there was a federal paid leave program, advocates say, that would just, again, take that stress away from these families.
So what kind of legislation is already out there, has already been introduced?
Well, this is interesting. So we're just coming off the tail end of the Trump administration. And that is when we really saw conservatives taking the lead on this and trying to find some creative ways. Now, Caitlin, I've covered politics for a very long time on the local, state, and federal level. And over the years, I have not really heard a lot of conservatives out there rallying for paid government family leave. However, because of the reasons I just told you, a lot of conservatives say, look, this is a conservative issue. If we care about life in the womb, we need to care about it after these babies are born. And we care about families. We want families to be healthy. And so this is a natural progression in what we believe. And so what we have seen on the Republican side, several plans that are budget neutral. One set of plans allows families to take 1 to 3 months' pay from their Social Security accounts and then delay activating their retirement benefits for 2 to 6 months. And then a separate plan lets parents advance about $5,000 from their child tax credits. And then instead of writing off $2,000 per child per year, they would write off $1,500 for 10 years. And then there are other alternatives for lower wage folks. Democrats want a bigger program. They want something that has a bigger federal footprint. But conservatives who are advocating for this are really hoping that they can come up with something bipartisan, even in this Congress, to give families some relief.
When it comes to incentives for lawmakers to pass something like this, especially conservative lawmakers, as you mentioned, are kind of taking up this mantle, would some sort of federal paid leave plan help with the rate of abortions?
Absolutely, Caitlin. I mean, the belief is that it would, because one of the number one things abortion-minded women say when they go in to have an abortion or go to a pregnancy center, they say, look, I can't afford this child. I don't have any support, and there's no way that I can have this baby because, and so this huge financial burden that they see this baby being, or the lack of support, their family perhaps is not supporting them. And so supporters of this say, look, if we could take that off the table for these women and say, you can apply for these benefits and have them immediately to buy diapers, to buy formula if you need it, to buy all the little things you realize you need when your little bundle of joy is born. That would just be such an amazing tool for women to have who are considering aborting their child just because they feel like they can't afford it. Maybe it's healthcare that they feel like they can't afford. I mean, the list goes on and on. It is expensive. And so the thought is that, yes, this would reduce the number of abortions and just produce healthier bonds with moms and their babies and dads and their babies. And so again, this is for conservatives. They feel like this is moving the ball forward. This is part of what should be pro-life policy. Yes, we want to encourage women to keep their babies, to have their babies, give birth to them, whether they keep them or offer them for adoption. And we want to support those women who, can't afford to support themselves.
Well, President Biden has said he wants good bipartisan legislation, and this feels like it could definitely be that. So hopefully it will be made a priority and we'll see something go through.
Yeah, hopefully. And, this is one of those things, Caitlin, that we've seen and we continue to see. I think supporters of this, in terms of conservatives who are supporting this, want to see something bipartisan because otherwise things just tend to go from one extreme to another. So perhaps, if it's not bipartisan, Democrats might pass a huge program and then you may see a Republican administration come in and cut that down. And so they really hope to come up with something bipartisan that will have a lasting effect for families.
Yes. Well, guys, you can see Jennifer's story on our website, cbnnews.com. So be sure to check that out. Jennifer, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Caitlin.
CBN News provides a faith-based perspective on the most important stories of the day. But it takes time, hard work, and resources. Will you help us continue to be a voice for truth in the media? Visit cbnnews.com/give now. And thanks for listening. Some other headlines we're following today. Half of all adults in the U.S. have received at least one COVID-19 shot, and almost a third are now fully vaccinated. This comes as Johns Hopkins University says 3 million people worldwide have now died from the disease. A new poll shows 75% of Americans say they'll get vaccinated, up from 67% in January. Now, White House Chief Advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci says people who have already been vaccinated may need to get booster shots, and an annual vaccine may be needed, similar to the seasonal flu shot. And President Joe Biden called the situation on America's southern border a crisis for the first time on Saturday, making that comment during an impromptu conversation with reporters in Delaware. The president was defending his administration's change of policy, deciding to let more refugees into the country, after at first saying they wouldn't increase President Trump's limits. As he was explaining the policy change, he said the administration hasn't been able to deal with the number of refugees because of the crisis on the border. That's all for now, but if you're enjoying the CBN News Daily Rundown, be sure to check out the CBN News app. As certain voices are censored and free speech platforms are shut down, downloading it will ensure you keep receiving news from a Christian perspective. I'll meet you back here tomorrow with more of the top stories and behind-the-scenes insight into how we're covering them.